Man, I'm gonna take us through a journey today through the scriptures, and so you probably read all of these scriptures at one time or another. But I hadn't done this in a while. I don't think when I go back and look at what have I done over past Christmases, and I think it's been a bit since we've done this. But man, it's easy to focus on like Santa and gift giving, and these days the Elf on the Shelf thing. Which, man, how bizarre do those things get, right? I'm so grateful we didn't have those when my kids were growing up. That looks like hours and hours of trying to figure out what to do to make this elf look like it's doing things. And so I'm thinking, wow, it's crazy. And then I mean, these days you got everybody celebrating everything, right? I mean, Hanukkah, which is always, I mean, that's a long tradition. Ramadan, that's a long tradition. Kwanzaa, and winter solstice. If you're into that, I got all my little social media. Everybody's happy winter solstice days. I got a lot of pagans that I hang out with, not personally, but I'm saying we like on social media, and we got all of our traditions really, but in the midst of all of those festivities. There's a story that I think if we're not careful, we just forget. And it's a promise. That's really what we celebrate. Nowhere in the scriptures does it say you have to celebrate Christmas. It's not in there. It's our choice to do what we want to do. I choose to celebrate the birth of Christ. More importantly, to me, the birth of Christ, see, it's not the end point. The end point is still to come. But it was the point that gives us the opportunity to have a great end, right? And so it's the fulfillment of a promise. That's really what this is about. That there's a faithful God who over the course of 4,000 years had made a promise and ultimately fulfilled on the day that we celebrate here Christmas. And so what I want to do is just kind of walk through that. It's redemption. It's a promise of redemption. And it's a promise of grace. See, people like to make God out to be this, he's all loving, all good, and all those things, and he is all that. And then they think, well, why don't he just forgive people? Why does all this stuff have to happen? That's the number one question I'm getting these days from a lot of progressives on, well, why did God just kill his son? Why did he just forgive everybody? And it's because we fail to understand how the character of God is so holy. See, because if you are all holy and righteous, that is that you do right, wrong has no place in that area. You can't forgive it because there's a right and there's a judgment that comes with that. And so if he's all a judge, all righteous, all grace, all loving, you can't sweep things out. You can't sweep things under the rug. You just can't. And so the reality then is he can't just go, I'm gonna let all y'all know. No. Nor is it a merit system. Well, if you'll jump through these hoops. No, it's that he needed to have his righteousness satisfied. And the only way that could be done was through Christ. And so what I want to let you know, and I want to start at the beginning. I know you're thinking, we're going to be here for hours. No, maybe just one. Not even that. But if we go all the way back into the garden, and you remember that, right? God told Adam and Eve, listen, in the day that you eat of that fruit, you're going to die. I have blessed you. I have brought you into a great and fertile land. You are in paradise. The waters, that surround this has created an incredible place for you. The animals subjugate themselves to you. And I'll walk with you. And I've only got one rule. Don't eat from that tree. And the day you eat from that tree, you die. Well, being human, right? I mean, wet paint, don't touch. What are we going to do, right? I mean, it's just in us. Some of you probably don't touch it, but most of us are like, really? And so you do, because it's human nature. We have a free will. And they chose to do the very thing that we would have chosen had we been there. And they ate. Now, they had a little help. They had Lucifer, Satan, the devil of old, appear in the form of a serpent, not one that slithered, but one that walked. And so he spoke to Eve, and she chose to take it, and Adam did too, and so there was sin involved. Now, we know that they didn't die, right? Not physically, but spiritually, it was though someone ripped the relationship right out of them. And so this like a house that's on fire, and it's just the guts have been burned out. And so that's why what Adam and Eve ended up being were dead people walking, right? They lost that relationship with God. They no longer were walking with him as they once did. And so he made a sacrifice at that time. And he made some skins and he clothed him with that. And then he pulled him out of that garden. And therein lies the issue. What will we do with that? And so as he's talking about the punishment that takes place, right? He looks at the man and he says, "Hey, you know what? Literally, when you were in paradise here, you didn't have to worry about thorns and thistles and working the land like that. But you know what you're going to be doing now? Working by the sweat of your brow. That's what's going to happen to you." And to the woman, he said, "You're going to have pain in childbirth, and you're going to have a desire to dominate your husband." And so there's going to be this tenseness that's going to be in that relationship that didn't have to be there. And then he looked at the serpent, which is where we're going in Genesis 3, and he says this, "And I will make enemies of you and the woman, and of your offspring and her descendant." You guys are going to war with each other forever. Satan, all of your people are going to war with her and all of her people. And he shall bruise your head, and he shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel. And he's saying, what Satan? He's going to crush you. That's the beginning of a promise that something's going to happen. I'm not sure they understood that, but there's something that's going to happen. Now, if we fast forward 20 generations, by this time, by the time Adam and Eve were created, and then by the time Abraham walks the earth, 20 generations have come and gone. And by this time, Syria is a nation, Phoenicia, which we would call the Egyptians, the Assyrians, they're all beginning to raise up. They all came from the line of Shem after Noah. Remember the flood, right? And so because just the devastation of mankind and how wicked they had gotten in just a few generations. And God said, "I'm sorry that I made them. 120 years, I'm going to give them to repent." And they did not. So he took two of every kind. You know the story, right? Brought them on the ark. Shut the door. God himself shut the door. Sent the great flood. And every nation, man, I'm geeking out on ancient history right now. I'm looking at the Ice Age and what happened. And every nation has a story about some sort of flood. And the scientists are saying, well, it had to have been tied somehow with the Ice Age, and it was when that flood happened. But they can't figure it all out. They can't put the pieces together to understand of what our world happened when this cataclysmic flood took place. And so from them, then, Shem created, and that's what we're talking about. And then with Ham, there was, it's a weird name for a man, isn't it? Cush, Canaanites, all of them, all the Hittites, Jebusites, all the ites that we're supposed to, Israel was supposed to destroy when they walked into the promised land. It was all a Ham's line. And then Japheth, those guys were the Greeks and the Persians and the Japanese and the Chinese. They all flow from there, and you can see that. And somewhere in the land of Ur, which is in that land where Ham had developed in Canaan, God chose a man named Abraham. And I want you to hear this promise. This is 2004 BC. That's 4,000 years ago for us. That there's a promise. My point of letting you know this is that this didn't just happen. God knew what he was doing. And I want you to hear ancient texts that remind us that God down through the ages had a plan. And so I know you know the story, but act like you've never heard it before, okay? Listen to what he says. Then the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, "By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this thing, and you have not withheld your son, your only son." Remember when he took Isaac to the top of that mountain? And God said, "Nope, now I know. Now I know." And God reckoned it to him as righteousness, Abraham. He said, "Now I know you're righteous. That you're willing to sacrifice everything for my sake." He said, then he says this, "By myself I have sworn." I don't need anybody else to swear. I, the Lord, am telling you what is going to happen. Because you have done this thing and not withheld your son, your only son, indeed I will greatly bless you. And I will greatly multiply your seed as the stars of heaven, as the sands which are on the seashore. Your seed shall possess the gate of the enemies. And in your seed, and that when he speaks of seed, he means the seed of man, like your people, right? But he says, and in your seeds all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. You know what he said? I will bless you, and I will make your seed a blessing to the nations. You know what he's saying there? I've got a promise, and I'm gonna meet that promise. And so we see this as it flows down. So 200 years after that, 1800 BC, 3 generations. There's a man named Jacob on the scene. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? We're seeing a promise fulfilled. We get to Jacob, and he's an old man, and he's got 12 sons, and he's blessing each of the 12 sons, and he's telling them what's going to happen with each of them. I won't read all of that to you, but it's powerful. In Genesis chapter 49, it says, "And Jacob summoned his sons and said, assemble yourselves, so that I may tell you what will happen to you in the days to come." And so then he begins to speak to Reuben, and he speaks to Simeon, and he speaks to all of those. And he gets down to Judah, and he said, "Judah is a lion's cub. From the prey, my son, you've gone up. He crouches, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion who dares to stir him up." Who's going to stir up the lion? "The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. And to him shall be the obedience of all the peoples." And I don't know if you know it or not, but that is the lion of the tribe of Judah that he speaks of. That far ago, 1800 years before Christ was born, God told Jacob, out of the line of Judah is going to come this Savior. And so it's powerful when you see these things unfold like that. Well, then we jump a bit, because I figure you don't want to be here all day. And so 1,000 years later, it's 740 BC. Hinduism is just now coming on the scene. The Babylonians have come and gone. Assyria is now the empire. And Isaiah, who is a prophet to Judah, the nations have split. And Judah and Benjamin are one nation, the southern nation, and the other 10 tribes are the northern nations. And Isaiah makes these statements. And this is what God says to him. And I know you know these. "But there will be no more gloom for her who was in anguish in earlier times. He treated the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali with contempt, but later on he will make it glorious by the way of the sea, on the other side of the Jordan, Galilee to the Gentiles." You see what he's narrowing this thing down. He's going, hey, listen, I know you're thinking broad, but I want you to understand, we're settling in on Jordan, and we're gonna zero in on Galilee of the Gentiles. And he says this: "The people who walk in darkness will see a great light." I mean, come on, this is 740 years before Jesus arrives in Galilee, and the bright light is displayed. I want you, if you know nothing, listen. And this is not debated. This is historical record that we have that says this is, and we see it taking place. He says, "The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. Those who live in a dark land, the light will shine on them. You will multiply the nation. You will increase their joy. They will rejoice in your presence as with joy of a harvest, as people rejoice in the divide of the spoils." Listen, they're all a wreck right now. They're losing their greatness, and they see nothing but spoil. And then God begins to speak this: "For you will break the yoke of their burden and the staff on their shoulders." You're not always going to be in bondage to other nations. "The rod of their oppressor is at the battle of Midian, for every boot of the marching warrior in the roar of battle and cloak rolled in blood will be burning fuel for the fire. For a child will be born to us. A son will be given to us. The government will rest on his shoulders. And his name will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. There will be no end to the increase of his government or peace. All these kingdoms that have come and gone, Egypt, our Sumerians, the Mesopotamia, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, come and gone. Not this one. On the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and uphold it with justice and righteousness for then on and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of armies will accomplish this. God's a warrior. And so I'm just telling you, it's going to happen. Man, there's so much in here. If we get to Isaiah 53, it's a little later in his prophecy, but he says this: all we like sheep have gone astray. I think this was one of the first scriptures. It just made me think about it. My mom helped me memorize this when I was 7th grade. We had this little book, and my mom would read out of it, and then she'd make us memorize scripture. And Isaiah 50, she taught my little junior high youth group, and she made us all memorize Isaiah 53:6. I think I remember memorizing the King James. I'm trying to read it in the right one here, but he says, all we like sheep have gone astray. We've each turned to its own way, but the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. You know what he's saying there? Prophecy that far back. He's letting us know, just like sheep, man, we go astray. God's a great shepherd, right? He's the good shepherd. And so he's going to go with that hook or whatever he's got to do. He's going to bring us back. You know what a shepherd does when one keeps straying, right? He breaks the leg. You seen those pictures with the lamb over the back of Jesus and those, pictures from years ago? That's one of those. And most of us are probably that kind, right? I'm the one. God's going to keep wondering. I'm going to break his leg, right? And then he puts me on his shoulders. That's the one of the 99 and one. He's not going to leave any of us out, and so he's going to do that. And this is what he says here. But yet he's also the scapegoat, and he's the sacrificial lamb. And so he's the one. The metaphors of the scriptures are amazing, but he's the one whose sin will be placed on us, so that freedom for others on him, so that freedom for us may take place. Well, if we keep going, we come to 700 BC. There's a prophet named Micah to Israel, to the 10 tribes that have departed. The Persians have taken the Assyrians by now. Romulus, if you've ever studied Roman history, it's not an empire yet, but Romulus is their leader, and he's a bulldog. And here's what Micah has to say. Talking to the tribes of Israel. Now muster yourselves in troops, daughters of troops that have laid siege against us. With a rod they will strike the judge of Israel on the cheek. But as for you, Bethlehem, Ephraim, too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you one will come forth for me to be ruler in Israel. His time of coming forth or from long ago. God's saying, I planned this thing long ago. From the days of eternity. Therefore he will give them up until that time when she who is in labor has given birth. Then the remainder of his kinsmen will return to the sons of Israel, and he will arise and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord. In the majesty of the name of the Lord is God. And they will remain, because at that time he will be great to the ends of the earth. This one will be our peace. I mean, come on. That's good. That's just good stuff. And then if we go, are you tracking with me, everybody? Wait, I know this is history and I geek, but maybe you should just 620 BC. We're getting there. All right, we're winding. When we get to 0, the sermon's over. Okay, but this is what it looks like, and I want you to hear it. In the days of Jeremiah, now you may have read Aesop's fables. Have y'all ever read the fables of Aesop? Aesop was born about the time Jeremiah was prophesying. I'm just trying to give you a little context. Listen to what the prophet says through Jeremiah in chapter 23. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, and he will reign as king and act wisely and do justice and righteousness in the land. In his days, Judah will be saved and Israel will live securely. And this is the name by which he will be called, the Lord our righteousness. Jehovah Tiddeskew, the Lord our righteousness. And so we see this as it just unfolds all the way through here. Now we come to a prophet that you may be familiar with as well, and his name is Daniel. Daniel lived in 520 BC. Buddha is just beginning his ministry when Daniel is out and about, and Babylon is conquered at this point. And in Daniel chapter 7, he says this: in the first year of Belteshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and division in his mind. He lay on his bed. Then he wrote the dream down and told the following summary of it. Daniel said, I was looking in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up like a great sea, and the four great beasts were coming up from the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion, but had wings of an eagle. And he goes through it, and he's just describing the empires that will fall, meaning Babylon. He comes down to verse 9, and he says this: I kept looking until thrones were set up. This is my favorite, I think one of my favorite titles for the name of God. And the Ancient of Days took his seat. All these kingdoms, they're trying to rise and be these superpowers, and they get knocked down by each other. And then he says, but then I saw thrones set up, and the Ancient of Days takes his seat. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was as pure wool. His throne was ablaze with flames. Its wheels were a burning fire. A river of fire was flowing, and coming out before him, thousands upon thousands were serving him, and myriads were standing before him. And the court convened, and the books were opened. And then I looked, because the sound of the boastful words which the horn was speaking, and I kept looking until the beast was killed, and its body was destroyed and given to the burning in fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but an extension of life was granted to them for a period of time. I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, the clouds of heaven. One like a son of man was coming, and he came up to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and honor and the kingdom, so that all the peoples, nations, and populations of all languages might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. And so we just see this on and on and on it goes. It's a promise. What we celebrate here is the fulfillment of a promise. We get to Zechariah. Zechariah says this: rejoice greatly, daughter of Zion. Shout in triumph, daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. And he is righteous and endowed with salvation, humble and mounted on a donkey. And I will eliminate the chariot from Ephraim and the horse from Jerusalem, and the bow of war will be eliminated. And he will speak peace to the nations. And his dominion will be from sea to sea and from the Euphrates to the end of the earth. Then we come to the last prophet. We come to Malachi, 430 BC. And he says this: for behold, the day is coming, burning like a furnace, and all the arrogant and every evildoer will be like chaff. And the day that is coming will set them ablaze, says the Lord of armies, so that I will leave them neither root nor branches. But for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in its wings. And you will go forth and frolic like calves from the stall. And you will crush the wicked under their feet, for they will be ashes under the soles of your feet on that day that I am preparing. Remember the law of Moses my servant, the statutes and ordinances which I command him in Horeb for all Israel. This is where I want to get. Behold, I am sending unto you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord. He will turn the hearts of their fathers back to their children, and the hearts of their children to their fathers, so that I will not come and strike the land with the complete destruction. That's the last we're going to hear of any promise for 400 years. I'm not going to take the time to get to Luke chapter 1, I don't think. But if I did, I would tell you this. There was a man that was visited by the angels named Zechariah. Zechariah was told that he was going to bear a son, and he would prepare the way of the Lord. His son was John the Baptist, full of the Holy Spirit from birth, and his wife Elizabeth. Zechariah didn't really believe what God had said would happen. And just like the 400 years of... Listen, I want you to catch this. This was 400 years ago. And the Lord shut up until an announcement was made. And the announcement was, but there's going to come a time when Elijah will show up and he will turn the hearts of the children, sons, back to their fathers. So we fast forward 400 years, Zechariah is now mute, just like God was mute. And when John the Baptist was born, they kept saying, we're going to name him Zechariah. Zechariah couldn't speak, but he knew that wasn't the name God told him they were going to name him, although I'd be proud to have it. He wrote on a piece of paper, his name will be John. And at that moment, his mouth opened up and he began to proclaim. And he proclaimed the very same thing, that this man will proclaim and the sons will turn back to their fathers. And so he was the one who prepared the way. That's as far as I wanted to get in our story today. Next Saturday morning, as we celebrate a brunch, and I'm going to read the Christmas story, it'll culminate with this. And it's just powerful. I just think it's important for us, you and me, to understand that God's faithful to his promises. Christmas isn't about all the junk that we make it. It's about a God that's faithful to promise us that he will redeem us. Man, it ought to be a great day when we celebrate the birth of the Christ, because it's a culmination of thousands of years of promises that we see. That's what I wanted to share with you today, and I'm glad you dropped by to let me do it. We're going to sing our way out of here, and